Deep within the vaults of the Natural History Museum in London lies an artifact so dangerous it remains locked away. It rests inside 7 nested boxes surrounded by protective charms. A stern handwritten letter warns anyone against opening it. This is not a weapon of war, but a beautiful shimmering gemstone known as the Delhi Purple Sapphire. The warning letter commands the reader to cast the jewel into the sea. It states clearly that the stone brings ultimate ruin to anyone who possesses it. Museum curators rarely speak of the terrible events attached to this cursed amethyst. The beautiful violet stone holds a dark legacy forged in blood and colonial greed. To understand the terror of the stone, we must look back to the Indian Rebellion of 1857. The air in the city of Kanpur was thick with smoke and the sounds of heavy artillery. British soldiers marched through the sacred streets, seeking treasure among the tragic ruin. Ancient temples became targets for looting. The Temple of Indra stood quiet against the chaos, holding centuries of divine reverence. Within its shadowed walls rested an idol adorned with magnificent jewels. Among these sacred offerings sat the purple gem, glowing with an unnatural light. A cavalryman named Colonel William Ferris ignored the sanctity of the shrine and stole the stone. Colonel William Ferris believed he had secured a rare purple sapphire of immense value. He did not realize it was actually a large amethyst. More importantly, he failed to sense the deep spiritual wrath he had just awakened. The priests of Indra had placed heavy ancient protections upon their sacred temple and its holy relics. The long voyage back to England was supposed to be a triumphant return for the cavalrymen. Instead, a dark shadow followed Colonel William Ferris across the ocean. The once vibrant and wealthy officer suddenly found his investments crumbling into dust. Unexplained financial disasters struck him from every possible direction, leaving his family entirely ruined. The curse did not merely drain his worldly wealth, but also began to consume his physical vitality. Colonel William Ferris developed a sudden wasting sickness that baffled the finest doctors in London. He spent his nights plagued by terrifying visions of angry figures standing at the foot of his bed. His mind slowly unraveled completely. Colonel William Ferris passed away in absolute misery, leaving the purple gemstone to his eldest son. The young man dismissed the whispers of a curse as pure superstition. He proudly displayed the sparkling stone in his home, hoping to sell it and restore their lost fortune. His naive confidence would soon be brutally shattered. The young heir experienced an immediate terrifying string of extreme bad luck. His business ventures collapsed overnight, and a sudden severe illness struck him down. Desperate and terrified, he gave the stone to a close friend, hoping to rid himself of the lingering evil. That friend tragically committed suicide just a few days later. Panic set in as the younger Ferris realized the lethal nature of the beautiful artifact. He needed to find someone who understood the bizarre and the occult. He turned to a brilliant, eccentric scholar and close friend named Edward Heron Allen. This man was a respected scientist who held a deep fascination with supernatural phenomena. Edward Heron Allen eagerly accepted the mysterious stone, believing his rational mind could conquer any ancient curse. He mounted the purple gem into a silver ring featuring a double-headed snake. To ensure his safety, he added 2 small amethyst scarabs engraved with astrological symbols. He thought these ancient protective wards would bind the evil. His confidence was entirely misplaced. The moment Edward Heron Allen brought the ring into his study, a profound sense of dread filled the room. Strange sounds echoed through the dark halls of his home during the midnight hours. Shadows seemed to detach themselves from the walls, slowly creeping toward his bed while he tried to sleep. Disasters began to strike his personal and professional life with alarming speed. A series of strange accidents befell his closest colleagues and family members. Edward Heron Allen found his acclaimed academic career suddenly faltering amid unusual controversies. He realized the protective silver snakes and ancient scarabs were completely useless against the awakened wrath of Indra. Seeking to test the curse, he lent the ring to a friend who was a professional singer. She simply wore the gorgeous stone during a highly anticipated evening performance. By the next morning, her voice had completely vanished, and she never sang another note. Her career was destroyed instantly by the lingering malice of the gem. Another brave friend requested to borrow the artifact purely to prove the stories were nonsense. He took the ring home and placed it proudly on his mantle. Within weeks, his entire life fell apart, leading to sudden, unexpected financial ruin and severe illness. He returned the cursed object, pleading with Edward to destroy it immediately. Edward Heron Allen grew genuinely terrified of the beautiful violet stone resting in his home. He wrapped the silver ring in heavy dark fabric and threw it into the dark waters of the Regent Canal. He watched it sink into the murky depths, feeling a massive weight lift from his exhausted soul. He finally felt safe. 3 months passed without incident, and Edward Heron Allen slowly regained his health and sanity. Then a heavy knock echoed at his front door on a rainy afternoon. A cheerful local dredger stood on his porch, holding the silver snake ring. The man had found it in the canal mud and recognized its famous owner. The dredger had brought the cursed artifact back out of pure kindness, hoping for a small reward. Edward Heron Allen stared at the purple stone in absolute frozen horror. The gem seemed to pulse with a dark, mocking energy. He realized then that the cursed object could never truly be discarded or cast away so easily. Desperation drove the scholar to extreme measures. He purchased a sturdy wooden box and placed the ring inside. He then placed that box inside another and another, until there were 7 layers of thick material separating him from the stone. He filled the empty spaces with protective herbs and locked the final outer iron clasp. Edward Heron Allen carried the heavy locked box to his bank and ordered them to place it in their deepest vault. He provided strict instructions that the container must never be opened until 3 years after his eventual death. He wanted to ensure the curse would die with him and never harm his beloved daughter. The scholar spent his remaining years far away from the terrible influence of the stolen artifact. He wrote extensively about his life, but rarely mentioned the purple nightmare locked in the dark. Yet he left a final letter addressed to whoever would eventually open the box. It contained a chilling recount of the relentless tragedy. Edward Heron Allen passed away in 1943 after living a full and fascinating life. His daughter respected his wishes and left the locked box untouched in the bank vault. 3 years later, the time finally came to reveal the hidden contents. She carefully retrieved the heavy container and prepared to open the 7 locks. Inside the final box, she found the silver ring flanked by the ancient amethyst scarabs. Beside it lay the detailed warning letter written by her late father. The letter explicitly warned her to throw the stone into the sea to prevent further disaster. It stated clearly that the gem was cursed and stained with blood. The young woman refused to touch the sinister jewelry. She decided to donate the entire terrifying package to the Natural History Museum in London. She believed a secure scientific institution could safely contain the lingering evil of the stone. The curators accepted the fascinating donation and read the accompanying letter with deep scholarly interest. The museum staff soon realized the artifact was not a genuine sapphire, but rather a deep purple amethyst. Despite the mineralogical correction, the eerie reputation of the stone remained incredibly potent. A young curator was assigned to transport the gem to a special exhibit. He immediately experienced a sudden severe bout of terrible, unfortunate events. A fierce storm unexpectedly broke out while the young curator traveled with the boxed artifact. His carriage was nearly overturned by the incredibly powerful winds and violent rain. Upon arriving at the museum, his health declined rapidly, and he required extensive medical care. The staff began to whisper that the famous curse was indeed very real. Another senior museum official decided to examine the silver ring and the amethyst scarabs closely. He opened the protective boxes and held the artifact in his bare hands. That very evening, his home was burglarized, and many of his most prized possessions were completely destroyed. The warning letter of Edward Heron Allen suddenly seemed completely prophetic. Fear began to spread among the educated curators of the famous Natural History institution. They decided it was far too dangerous to keep the stone on public display. The silver ring and its warning letter were quietly returned to the heavy nested boxes. The artifact was then sealed away in the secure vaults deep below ground. For decades, the cursed stone rested in absolute darkness, surrounded by ancient fossils and silent stones. Few people outside the museum knew of its existence or the bloody history attached to it. Occasionally, a brave researcher would request to view the object for their studies. Most were strongly discouraged by the terrified senior vault administrators. In the early 2000s, a daring museum executive decided to bring the stone back into the light. He wanted to feature the artifact in a special exhibition about cursed and mysterious historical objects. The moment the stone was moved from its protective vault, terrible things began to happen across the entire museum property. Once again, the executive who organized the exhibit experienced a massive, sudden kidney stone that required immediate emergency surgery. He fell violently ill just hours before the grand opening ceremony. Several other staff members involved in the display also suffered sudden mysterious injuries and severe illnesses. The dark wrath of the stolen artifact had clearly not faded away. The most chilling incident involved a professional photographer hired to capture detailed images of the ring. He set up his complex lighting equipment to photograph the purple gem. As he focused his camera lens, a sudden unseen force shattered his expensive equipment entirely. He fled the room, refusing to ever return to the museum basement again. It became undeniably clear that the stolen amethyst still held a deep spiritual grudge. The protective wards and silver snakes could not contain the fury of the ancient temple priests. The museum quickly ended the special exhibition and returned the cursed object to the shadows. It was placed back inside its 7 protective nested wooden boxes. The warning letter written by Edward Heron Allen remains a vital part of the dark artifact. It serves as a grim reminder that some treasures are meant to be left completely alone. The colonial arrogance that ripped the stone from its sacred home still demands a heavy, terrible price from anyone who claims ownership today. Colonel William Ferris paid for his greedy theft with his sanity, his wealth, and his life. His family suffered endlessly for a crime they did not commit. The brilliant scholar, Edward Heron Allen, lived in constant fear of the beautiful, sinister object. None of them could escape the relentless reaching shadow of the temple curse. The story of this cursed amethyst challenges our modern understanding of the natural world. We view gemstones as beautiful inert objects formed by intense heat and incredible pressure deep underground. Yet this particular stone seems to possess a violent, active consciousness of its own. It actively seeks to destroy the lives of those who hold it. Some skeptics argue that the curse is nothing more than a series of unfortunate, tragic coincidences. They believe the terrible events were simply natural disasters, amplified by pure human superstition. But those who have actually stood near the unsealed box tell a different story. They describe a heavy, suffocating presence that immediately drains the surrounding air. The temple in Kanpur, where the stone originated, was a place of profound, deep spiritual power. The priests who guarded the sacred idols understood the ancient forces of the universe perfectly. When the cavalrymen desecrated their holy sanctuary, they ensured the stolen treasure would become a living nightmare. Their powerful vengeance has survived for over a century. The double-headed silver snake, added by the British scholar, only made the artifact look more sinister. The twin snakes seem to writhe and twist when the light hits the purple stone just right. The astrological symbols on the accompanying scarabs offer absolutely no real protection. They merely bind the dark, chaotic energy tightly to the ring. Today, the vault in London remains locked securely tight against the curiosity of the outside world. The curators respect the violent history of the purple gem and refuse to handle it without extreme caution. It sits completely alone in the dark, waiting silently for the next unfortunate soul to open the heavy, ancient wooden lid. If you ever find yourself walking through the grand halls of the Natural History Museum, remember the hidden terror beneath your feet. Beneath the brilliant displays of dinosaurs and rare exotic animals lies a small wooden box holding pure evil. The purple gem continues to radiate a cold, malicious energy through the thick steel vault doors. There are rumors that the stone sometimes hums with a faint, vibrating, unnatural frequency in the dead of night. Security guards patrolling the lower levels often report sudden drops in temperature near the secured vault. Some claim to hear soft, angry whispers echoing down the empty concrete corridors when they stand too close to the door. The letter written by Edward Heron Allen explicitly demands that the stone be thrown into the deep ocean. He believed that only the crushing weight of the sea could contain the demonic wrath inside the gem. Yet the museum insists on keeping the artifact safely preserved for future scientific and historical study, despite the incredible danger. Perhaps keeping the cursed ring locked away in a secure vault is truly the safest possible option. Releasing it into the world might allow the stone to find its way back into human hands once again. Just like the local dredger who pulled it from the dark canal, someone would inevitably find it and bring it home. The beautiful violet light of the gem is a perfect supernatural trap designed to lure greedy souls. It promises wealth and power while secretly preparing to strip away everything the victim holds dear. It is a brilliant masterclass in mystical revenge, designed by ancient priests who knew exactly how to punish the sins of arrogant invaders. Colonel William Ferris thought he was claiming a prize of war when he looted the ruined sacred temple. He was actually carrying a spiritual bomb straight into the heart of his own family home. His actions doomed his descendants to decades of extreme misery and unexplainable tragedy that could never be undone or truly forgiven. The brilliant scholar, Edward Heron Allen, thought his superior intellect could easily overcome ancient Indian magic. He learned a harsh, brutal lesson about the limits of Western science and pure rational thought. Some forces in this world cannot be measured or controlled by simple logic and protective silver charms. They must simply be feared and avoided completely. The tragic victims of the purple amethyst serve as a permanent historical warning to us all. We must respect the sacred items of the past and leave the ancient resting places completely undisturbed. The arrogant desire to possess beautiful, rare things often leads directly to our own inevitable, terrible destruction. Greed always carries a massive, heavy price. The gemstone remains a dark, hidden secret in one of the most famous museums in the entire world. It is an artifact that refuses to be forgotten, even as it sits trapped in the total darkness. The ancient protective wards of the Indian priests remain perfectly active, waiting patiently for another foolish victim to claim the prize. We can only hope that the 7 locked wooden boxes continue to hold the wrathful spirit at bay. The protective herbs and heavy iron clasps must stand firm against the relentless dark pressure building inside. The beautiful cursed object must never be allowed to see the bright light of day or touch human skin ever again. The haunting legacy of the purple gemstone is a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that surround us. It is a perfect, terrifying example of an object that carries the heavy spiritual weight of its bloody past. The artifact demands ultimate respect through the sheer, brutal violence of its relentless, tragic curse. It will never truly rest. So heed the final, desperate written warning of the brilliant, terrified scholar who locked the horror away. Never seek out the beautiful cursed stone, and never attempt to possess its dark, shining glory. If you value your life, your sanity, and your family, you will leave the terrible ancient secrets locked forever in the deep, silent dark.